Well, Alexandre Carrier's season stats even matter when it comes to his future with the Nashville Predators. We're going to talk about that and the seasons of Luke Schenn and Tyson Barrie on today's Locked On Predators podcast.
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Predators podcast, and thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are your free daily Nashville Predators podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to kick off our Monday episode with a shout out to our Locked On Pred heads, our everyday listeners who tune in to talk all things Nashville Predators with us Monday through Friday. We appreciate your support. We love that we get to spend just a part of your day with you. I'm Ann Kimmel. I am a writer for Penalty Box Radio, and friends, I have a partner in crime.
You do. I'm Emma Lingen, and I am the Predators site editor and reporter for the Hockey News.
So Emma and I have been working through season superlatives for the Nashville Predators. We are in the thick of the defense. And on today's show, we are going to award superlatives to 3 defensemen whose seasons had some high stakes, high drama. We're talking about Alexandre Carrier, Luke Schenn, and Tyson Barrie. But before we dive into that, want to let you know today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. All right, Emma, we are chugging through season superlatives. This has been a huge project as the offseason kicked off. We've gone through our forwards. We're in the thick of the defensemen. And in this episode is the complicated guys. This is the episode where you got to try to figure out what the hell happened and what is going to happen next with these 3 players. And we're going to kick it off talking about Alexandre Carrier. 73 games, 4 goals, 16 assists. Woo! Monday, folks. 20 points, a +7 for Alexandre Carrier. Emma, what is your season superlative for Carrier?
You know how like dogs, the smaller they are, the feistier they are, and like they think they're a lot bigger than they are, and they're really not. Like it's like the Chihuahua will be the one that's like barking like his head off at you and like thinks he's really intimidating. I'm gonna say Alex Carrier is like a human Chihuahua in that way. Like I think that he's a smaller guy. You know, I think he's listed at 5'11". Having stood next to the man numerous times, I would say that that's a case of padding the numbers a little bit. I don't think he's
generous.
It's generous. It's generous. He is certainly not 6 foot. We can say that. And for the record, I'm 5'3", and to me, everyone looks tall. And if someone doesn't look tall to me, then that should tell you something.
And they're not 6 feet tall.
Yeah, correct.
Yes.
So yes, but he's such an angel. He's such a sweet soul. And that's the thing too, that I'm like, I struggled with Chihuahua because I feel like Chihuahuas are known to be like kind of nasty. Right. He's not, but like on the ice, it's like he's that little dog who's trying to play with all the big dogs and trying to intimidate them and like thinks that they're, and it's like, oh, sweet baby angel. It's not that it impacts his skill or his, his ability to play his position. But I think we saw it was last year when the only fight that he's ever gotten in, he picked the wrong guy. He
went big and then went home.
He did exactly that. He went big and then he went right home with a broken collarbone. So it's like, hey, buddy, that's why we pick on guys our own size. So yes, that's mine.
Yeah. Oh, I love that one. Alexandre Carrier, he is somebody, I agree with you. He is somebody I would classify in the kindest of terms as fun size. when it comes to a defenseman. He's fun size.
That's what I call myself when people call
Yes.
me short. I say, no, fun size.
Fun size. Everybody loves the fun size candy.
Yeah.
Alexandre Carrier and Emma Lingen, fun size. For me, and I will stand by what I have said about Alexandre Carrier from day one. You know, he is 100% most likely to be cast in Bridgerton. If there was ever a hockey player in the entire National Hockey League who he looks more like a Viscount or a Duke than anyone in the entire league, and that is a hill I will die on. But when it comes to like on ice things, I would award him the superlative of most likely to take one for the team, because like you talked about, this is not somebody who's like maybe the most physically intimidating presence, but I was really surprised to learn Alexandre Carrier third in blocked shots on the team. Just 2 behind Ryan Patrick, who blocks a lot of them with his face, bless. And only Roman Josi had more blocked shots than those two. And for some reason, when I looked at that stat, I was surprised. But then you think back on the season and you're like, you know what? I did see him do that. So while he is a player who is not gonna, let's hope, get into a lot of fisticuffs, he's not somebody who's gonna, like, he learned his lesson, the Chihuahua, and he's not necessarily someone who is going to take an opposing player off their skates. This is somebody who's willing to put it on the line, to do what he has to do for the team. So his physicality contributions look very different than, say, his, pairing partner, Jeremy Lauzon. One of those things is not like the other on a number of ways.
Let's let Lauzon do the fighting from now on.
I mean, let's me do the fighting.
Anyone else?
Anyone. Come on. Let's let Luke Evangelista take a swing next time. Yeah. So, for me, I was, impressed. You've got to like what he does defensively and all of that stuff. But for me, I was like, you know what? You look back and kudos to him, because he really does get in front of that puck every chance that he gets. He's not going to be the guy that knocks somebody off their skates, but he is going to be the guy that's going to try to get, to prevent that puck from getting to the goal. Also played a lot of time on the penalty kill. You gotta give him credit for that. I love too, offensively, career high in goals. Now, granted, it was only 4, but career high in goals. It's interesting, and I feel like it's tough to judge Alexandre Carrier, because he had that breakout season in 2021-22, where he played 77 games. He had 30 points. He was a plus 26. And then the next year, so many injuries in just such an up and down season. And so it's kind of difficult when you kick it off with that kind of a breakout season. It's difficult to kind of gauge really, where is he? Is it a little bit of a slump, or was the breakout season the exception and not the rule? Was that injury season the exception, not the rule? And so Carrier was given by Barry Trotz, he was given a prove it contract this year, 1 year, $2.5 million, because they didn't see enough probably from Carrier with injury last season. When you look at what we saw this season from Carrier, Emma, did he do enough in a prove it season for the Nashville Predators?
I don't think he did, personally, for a few reasons. I think when you've got Dante Fabro right there, who those two have always kind of been lumped together. And to me, that was kind of the writing was on the wall for Carrier when the Predators re-signed Dante Fabro to a 1-year extension. Granted, he was a restricted free agent, so a little bit different, but still, I think the difference between those two is Dante Fabro probably wasn't going to get a much better offer elsewhere on the market, and so might as well stay with what right? But I think Carrier, because of that breakout rookie season that you were talking about, his name, and we saw this at the trade deadline,
yes,
his name carries a lot of value on the trade market, and I think the same will be true on the free agent market. And so I think the Predators just have such a backlog of defensemen that Carrier does become expendable at that point. I think where they would need to add more on the blue line would be in the size category. And that, as we have just discussed at length, is not something that Carrier brings to the table. Not that he doesn't bring lots of other great attributes to the table, but I think that he does kind of become expendable because I don't think we saw enough from him this year to be like, if he's maybe small and like you said, he's not going to knock guys off his skates. If he's contributing more offensively, then I think that we're having a different conversation right now. But
right,
I just think that where the Predators are and with the guys that they have coming up through the pipeline, I mean, you've got Spencer Stastny, who's ready. Like, he's definitely ready. You've got Mark Del Gaizo, who's close to, if not ready. And then, just to me, I think Carrier, for his sake, like, he will get more highly valued on the free agent market than he will in Nashville. So I think that, to me, it doesn't really make a lot of sense for him to come back.
To your point, I think it almost doesn't matter, short of an absolutely outrageously excellent season, what Carrier did this year, because of that backlog with what they've got coming up. You really at some point have to make room. And if he doesn't have just, a knock your socks off season, he is the guy, I think, that goes, just logistically. It's a little bit of a shame. But what, this is one of those things, hindsight, you think, man, what could the Predators have gotten for him at the trade deadline? And that was a call, the Barrie Trotz had to make. I don't know. We haven't heard specifics on, specifically what offers he did receive about Carrier, but there was, of course, a ton of buzz around him. And you think, man, now you're going to lose him for nothing. But, Barrie Trotz at that point was like, look, I'm going to give the team, I'm going to dance with the girl that brought me. Like, these guys got themselves into position for the postseason. Let's see what they can do. But I just don't know, with the way the Predators are structured right now on the blue line, whether he could have done enough to make himself a key piece moving forward. And that stinks because he is very talented, delightful person. Something to keep an eye on. Our friend JD Young at Locked On Sharks is actually working on an episode about why San Jose should target Alexandre Carrier. So it's going to be really interesting to see. I am with you. I think he's going to generate a lot of interest. I think that's going to continue for him as a UFA. We're going to have to see where he ends up. That sweet Bridgerton Chihuahua that we love.
Wow. Beautiful. I want to, as much as I would love to end on sweet Bridgerton Chihuahua, I'm so sorry, but I do have to throw in here too, going back to the trade deadline, and you don't want to now let him walk for nothing if you're Barrie Trotz. I still think in the long run, Barrie Trotz not trading him at the trade deadline, it was less about Carrier. It was less about like, oh, Alex Carrier is going to be the reason that we make a meaningful playoff run, so we have to keep him. Like, that, clearly that's not it. I think it was more Barrie Trotz knew how much buzz he was getting on the trade market, and so he knew that he was in possession of a hot commodity. And so he thought, if he thought he was getting lowballed on the offers, again, we don't know what the offers were, but if he thought he was getting lowballed, and the Predators were not a team in full sell mode at this point, so
Right.
he wasn't just going to let him go for something that was, Barrie Trotz is still the new guy, right? This was his first trade deadline as a GM, and so he's got to build this reputation with other GMs and other teams, and be like, if he lets Carrier go for a subpar return, then that, it reflects negatively on him. And it's like, oh, this guy is going to be easy. Let's take advantage of the new guy, and let's, try to lowball him for other stuff. And then that gives him less leverage on the trade market. And so I think that, yes, it is unfortunate. You don't want to let a guy like Carrier walk for nothing, but I do still think that it helps Trotz's negotiating power in the long run when it comes to making, potentially bigger trades.
Yeah. And I'm a big fan of in the case of Alexandre Carrier, but especially in the case of somebody like UC Saros, just because you have a piece that is highly valuable on the trade market doesn't mean you are better off trading it. It really doesn't,
Correct. As my mom likes to say, just because you can doesn't mean you should. So
wisdom for a number of situations, my friends.
Yes.
Emma's mom is correct. Coming up, Emma and I are going to talk about two other blue liners who had unexpected seasons for different reasons in 2023, 2024. We got to talk about Luke Schenn, and y'all, we have got to talk about Tyson Barrie's season. First, want to let you know today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Summertime means baseball. It means the NBA Finals. It means the NHL Finals and more. And friends, you can bet it all on FanDuel. Right now, new customers at FanDuel get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet everything from the Finals MVP to who's going to hit one out of the park. We got the Stanley Cup Finals going on. Who do you think is going to take game 2? Check out all of the action on FanDuel and jump in the game there. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel, it's America's #1 sportsbook. All right, Emma, we are working through defenseman superlatives. We're talking about the high drama dudes on the blue line. Lots of storylines packed into these three guys. Alexandre Carrier, we talked about. Luke Schenn. Okay, this was a whole thing. Luke Schenn played 63 games, 1 goal, 6 assists, 7 points, a +1. This was such an interesting season, not just for Luke Schenn personally, but to watch the fan base watch the season of Luke Schenn.
I feel like fans turned on him so quickly. And it's
gosh.
like, the man has played 1 game, and then he got hurt. And I don't know that it was ever said publicly what the injury was. I mean, I know what his injury was, but let me just say it was significant. It required surgery. And the fact that he was out there, that he made it back within that same season, I think is very impressive. And I have to give him credit for that. Do I think that he is worth the contract that Barrie Trotz gave him? No. But I feel like people have, myself included, I know I have been very, very honest about my feelings about Luke Schenn's play on the ice elsewhere. But I think, you do have to give him a little bit of grace because of that injury, because of, getting adjusted to Brunette's system. And it's a lot, and it takes a lot out of anyone, but especially, if you're not healthy while you're trying to do it. So Luke Schenn, I think that he does have the size that the Predators need more of, but definitely not the most skilled defenseman, which is why my superlative, I would say, most likely to take your lunch money or something. I feel like he's just he's a lovely person, off the ice. He's lovely, but I think that he's just kind of that. He's the enforcer, the big bully that is just going to intimidate you with his size. And I think that he's kind of the bully that will stand up for his little brothers or whatever. True. And, I think we saw at one point he was fighting 2 guys at once when Spencer Stastny got hurt, and he was winning both of the fights. I'm like, how do you do that? And so I'm I got to give him credit for that. He's good at that. But yeah, I would say most likely to just scare you into giving him your lunch money.
I like that for sure. For me, I think he is the Rodney Dangerfield of the Nashville Predators. He can't get no respect.
Yeah.
And it was look, I agree with you. In free agency, I think the Gus Nyquist signing, I think, was maybe a little bit of a hard sell. I think the Luke Schenn signing was an even harder sell. It was a 3-year deal, $8.25 million. I mean, that's not nothing. And, 33 years old. And then, like you said, played the first game, had this significant injury, missed 20 games with this injury. And then he had to come in 20 games later, 21 games later than everybody else and try to play catch up. He had to try to make up ground with the team that had slowly already kind of started making some adjustments. And I agree with you, like, I always laugh, he's built like Fred Flintstone. Luke Schenn reminds me of Fred Flintstone. He's just big and broad, and he brought that physical presence. He had 202 hits in just 63 games. He was 4th on the team behind, of course, Jeremy Lauzon, Cole Smith, Kiefer Sherwood, 6th in block shots. But he was like kind of the move them out of the way player. We talk about Alexandre Carrier is not a guy who is going to move people necessarily away from the net. Luke Schenn's going to move y'all. Like he is going to move you. And he was one of the players that I think, looking at that Vancouver series where I feel like, okay, this is a guy who plays that strong game. Like we saw Vancouver kind of manhandle the Predators with, but the rest of the game, I just don't think was there for the Nashville Predators. You know what I'm saying? And at this point for that contract, you've got to bring more than one dimension to the Predators. Now, do I think he's going to stick around? Yes, because of that contract. Ain't nobody going to take that contract, first of all. But second of all, like he is, again, the size guy.
Yeah, so, it's the thing. He's kind of, I agree with you. That contract's going to be real hard to move. And it's interesting, too, because he has said that a big part of why he came to Nashville in free agency was because of Ryan McDonagh. And they had played together in Tampa. And Ryan McDonagh is not here no more. So we'll see. But like you said, it is kind of job security for Schenn, because that playoff series taught us that one of the biggest areas where the Preds are lacking is size. Right. And Schenn can be there like, well, I got that going for me. But just there were too many that I saw, not in the playoffs necessarily, but just throughout the year, just too many lazy attempts at clearing pucks, and he looked slow out there. I mean, he moved like he's got a piano on his back sometimes, and it's like, I just think that does not fit the Andrew Brunette system. But at the same time, you like his size and you want to have more of that, and that's, ideally you'd have a guy like Jeremy Lauzon who has size and skill. Right. And you weren't really seeing that from Schenn. And again, with the injury and everything else this last year, I don't want to completely write him off. I'd like to see if maybe he redeems himself at all this year.
Very true. Yeah.
But my expectations are not that high.
Yeah.
I'll say that.
And I'm with you looking forward. I think there's job security for Schenn, with that contract, but also you look at who the Predators are going to be moving probably into the defensive core: Spencer Stastny, Mark Del Gaizo. These are not guys with size. No. So they're going to need Luke Schenn for that. The other area where I think that he was probably helpful, it was off ice, just being, again, another veteran guy in the locker room through a lot of ups and downs, but his season was so full of ups and downs as well. I'm with you. It will be very interesting to see, through the off, what happens with him in the off season and come training camp. Are we going to see a different Luke Schenn? Is he going to be in a little bit better shape? And I'm certainly not implying that he was terribly out of shape at the end of the season or anything, but just he started behind. What is the season going to look like for Luke Schenn when he can go into training camp and kind of be up to speed with everyone else? I don't know. We're going to have to wait and see. It's going to be one of the defensemen to keep an eye on for sure. Another one that we probably aren't going to have to keep our eye on at training camp, Emma. I'm just going out on a limb on this one, my friends. We have absolutely got to talk about what the heck happened with Tyson Barrie this season. So coming up later this week, Emma and I are going to continue working through our season superlatives with the defensemen. We also are going to talk about the goaltenders and give them their awards. We also have a very interesting conversation we want to have about combine questions. What are we asking these players at the combine, and why are we asking it? And we're going to tell you what we think you should ask these young players. Emma and I have some big thoughts on that, but we got to wrap up this episode talking about Tyson Barrie. Let's just put the stats out there. 41 games played, 1 goal, 15 points, -10. Emma, give him a superlative and then we'll try to unpack what the heck happened.
Well, my superlative has nothing to do with his on-ice performance, unfortunately, but I feel like that's kind of on brand. Tyson Barrie is the most likely to make me go viral because he's done it twice.
No kidding. Okay, tell us how.
He's done it twice. Number one, when he first got traded to Nashville, we were in Florida. I was traveling with the team at the time, so we were in Florida. Met us in Florida. He made it there. His gear didn't. And so at first it wasn't clear whether he was going to play in that game or not. Gear ended up getting there. He was able to play. He recorded an assist in his first game with the Predators, which was a win on the road over the Florida Panthers, who obviously they went to the Stanley Cup final. Very good team. So that was a big deal at the time. And again, for a team like the Predators, they don't really have a road contingent of media that travel.
Right.
So after the game, it was his first game with the Preds, and it was a win, and he had a point. Nick Barnowski from Preds PR kind of asked him, like, okay, do you mind doing media? And he goes, yeah, that's fine. And you can see him kind of like bracing himself. And then I walk in and it's just me. And he's like kind of looking behind me, like, is there anyone? I was like, yeah, it's just me. And remember, he came from Edmonton. He came from a Canadian market. And
Whole different ball game.
He was like, this is it? And I was like, yeah. And again, we're in Florida, which isn't like it's not like Toronto where you're going to have a ton of media there regardless. And so he's like, it's just you? I was like, yeah. And he goes, oh, love Nashville. And I tweeted that. And I think Sportsnet picked it up and showed it on TV. And so I got a lot of love for that one. The other time he made me go viral, later in the year on Pride Night. And we had asked him, we'd asked a handful of players about like what Pride Night means to them. And he gave a very, very insightful and thoughtful answer, which I really appreciated. And I tweeted, I was like, I can't summarize this. I have to tweet out the full text of his answer because it was just really, really good. And so I put it in the notes app and I tweeted the picture of it. And he talked about how he had, had some really close friends who are part of the LGBTQ community. And he, no little kid who's like struggling with their identity should feel like they shouldn't be able to be themselves, and how it means so much to him. And he was really proud to be a part of a team that was wearing the Pride jerseys, because at the time there was a bit of controversy around that. Yeah. And so he got a lot of love for that response. He got a lot of other, probably the opposite of love for that response too. But yeah, those were the two times that Tyson Barrie made me go viral on social media. So thanks for that.
It had to be total culture shock to go from the Edmonton media, and we'll just leave it at that. We'll just let that hang there without diving into the specifics. To
it's a Canadian market. Yeah.
Hey, Emma.
Yeah. I'm just like, hey, like me and my little recorder. I'm like, hey, again,
that's
like
amazing
5'3" little me. And I'm just like, hey, can I ask you some questions? And that was it. And he was like, oh, I love Nashville. This is great. I was like, yeah, see, like, it's fine.
My superlative is just very simple. Most likely to look around the room and ask, am I still here? Am I still here? This was the most bizarre scenario to me with Tyson Barrie, came here in the Ekholm trade. And you knew going into the season, he probably wasn't going to be a long-term piece necessarily for the Predators because they're talking about resetting and getting younger. But then when he was a healthy scratch, and we would ask Andrew Brunette about it, he would talk about it's a reset. It's just a reset, which is something that he did, but he did a quote unquote reset healthy scratches with players like Luke Evangelista or Cody Glass, like young players. It's kind of a weird thing with a veteran like Tyson Barrie. And then you kind of felt like, wow, the writing is so on the wall and I think it was like November when Alexandre Carrier got injured, bless. And instead of putting Tyson Barrie in, they called up Spencer Stasny or Mark Del Gaizo or both of them. And it was like, woof. Like they talk about saying something without saying anything. And then of course you had the news leak that Tyson Barrie had asked permission to talk to other teams, and Barry Trotz, not a fan. Like went on the radio show and was like, hey, look, didn't come from us. We are super disappointed. But what was interesting is they kind of got past that. And in the final conversations in Barry's time here was that he handles this situation like a pro and he's very valuable in the locker room. And, so it was just such an interesting behind the scenes, drama filled, like sands through the hourglass. So are the days of your lives season for Tyson Barrie. And you really felt like at the trade deadline, of course he is going to go somewhere else. And he didn't.
Well, again, I think that speaks to Barry Trotz being well aware that, everyone knows we're trying to get rid of this guy. So they're going to try to lowball me.
Right.
And be like, here, give us Tyson Barrie and we'll give you a bucket of pucks. And he's like, we're not doing that. And so I just think Tyson Barrie is the consummate pro. Like, I can't say enough good things about him. I think like it is unfortunate. I don't think it was him. I think it was his agent who leaked the information. And
Correct.
Now, granted, your representation is an extension of you, the player. So like it doesn't reflect well on him. But Tyson is just so not the kind of guy who is going to be trying to create drama in the media and trying to that's just not him. And so it is unfortunate what he went through this year, especially for how valuable he was to this team last season when he arrived, after that Florida game. I mean, he was wearing an A like 2 games into his time with the Predators because everyone was gone, either injured or traded. And he was a great leader on this team. And, I think that he has gone through a lot in the last couple years. And so it was, I hated it for him. Like I hated seeing him benched and healthy scratched as much as he was this year. But part of it, one thing I do think is that people are like, oh, Barry Trotz or Andrew Brunette or whoever is sending a message and they're punishing him and he's in timeout. To an extent, maybe, but I think the bigger thing, looking at the big picture here is the decision to call up Stastny and or Del Gaizo. Those guys are your future. Whether or not Barry had requested a trade this year, he was not going to be part of the future plans. I mean, his contract was up at the end of this season. He was not going to be coming back just because of the amount on his contract. And so I think it was more about, okay, if these guys really are going to be our future at the NHL level next year, we got to get them some reps and see, are they where we think they are, in terms of their readiness to take it to the next level. So I think that was the bigger piece of it. It's just the timing of everything. It was just unfortunate. And I do think that they got through it, as well as they could. And, I just have to give Tice a ton of credit for the way he handled that.
Yeah. And truly, when you talk about him, when you hear from the players, when you hear from Andrew Brunette, the message was, as difficult as the season was, consummate professional in a situation that was not great. I mean, it just was just rough for Tyson Barrie all the way around. Somebody that, again, not going to see back on the Predators roster next season. It'll be interesting to see, you know, where does he end up? That's a name going to be listening for, you know, once the free agency kicks off coming up. But yeah, Tyson Barrie, it was great, but it was brief. This was a bit of a fling for the Nashville Predators. He was Mr. Right now, not Mr. Right.
It was great until it wasn't. And then it really wasn't.
And then it really wasn't. We're going to wrap up the defensemen coming up later this week. We're going to talk about those two young players that maybe got that ice time from Tyson Barrie. We're going to talk about the little bit we saw from Spencer Stastny and Mark Del Gaizo and what their performances may mean for the Predators moving forward. So that's coming up later this week. In the meantime, Emma, where can everybody find you and find your work?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Emma_Lingen, and you can find my work online at the Hockey News.
And you can find me on social media at ANK_Mama on Ice. You can find my work at Penalty Box Radio as well. That's going to do it for today's episode of the Locked On Predators podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We'll be back tomorrow with an all new episode. We'll see you then.